Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. General Conference is not very far away. And if you've been watching my channel for the last few months, one question I've had on my mind is what else could possibly change in the church? Especially since the beginning of President Nelson's presidency, all the way until now, there have been many changes. And many of them have been big changes to things that I never thought would change. Like getting rid of the Saturday evening session of General Conference. I'm stunned by that. I thought that throughout the millennium until the earth is celestialized, that would always be the priesthood session of General Conference. But we don't have it anymore. And so, I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier today, about what else could possibly happen. And one thing that I've noticed as I've tried to document it on my spreadsheets is that the church seems to be trying to get more missionaries. Like one time I described it as an all hands on deck situation. And I think it goes along with President Nelson's concept that he introduced of the Lord's Youth Battalion. President Nelson is the one that used the analogy of this is the last half of the ninth inning. And so that means it's the last team that's up to bat before the game is over. And the church has done a lot of things to make it so we have more missionaries. And what I want to explore in this video is the idea that the church could change something with how long missionaries serve, potentially the age, and some other things. So let's look at it like this. Okay, we're going to start here. Let's go to my spreadsheet called Timeline, Preparing the Church for the Second Coming. And let's look at President Nelson's first couple general conferences. We've done this, I think, a couple times recently, but in case you missed it, in his first general conference, we had the retirement of home teaching and visiting teaching. It was replaced by what we now call ministering. That was a huge change. And then there was also the combining of the high priest quorum and the elders quorum into one big elders quorum. That was another big change. So that was during his first general conference. And just because of the trend since that time with all these changes, I think we're going to see something similar in this upcoming general conference, which is going to be President Oak's first general conference as president of the church. In his second general conference, President Nelson introduced 2-hour church and come follow me, stating that the church wants to be a home-centered, church-supported system where, yes, you come to church, but there needs to be gospel learning that takes place in the home. And parents have the responsibility to teach their children. Just more emphasis on that. And then you can see all the different things that I have here on the spreadsheet. Let's go ahead and fast forward to the first big change that I've noted during President Oak's presidency, which came October 28th. So this was just like, I guess, 2 weeks after he became president of the church. We have the new sleeveless garments for women available nationwide. And I guess along with that, these like garment slips for women. And then in November, Saturday evening session of General Conference was discontinued. And then just a few days after that, the mission age was lowered for women from 19 to 18, which stunned me. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. On December 14th, the Portland, Maine temple was announced by Elder Alan D. Haney. This was the first time that a temple had been announced by a member of an area presidency. And it was announced that going forward, we're not going to have temple announcements in General Conference. It's going to be done in the area in which the temple is going to be built. And it can still be the first presidency or someone from the Quorum of the 12, but it can also include area presidencies. So that's a huge change. And I am assuming that if there's like a really important temple that's going to be announced, like here in Independence, Missouri, or Far West, or Adirondack. I'm assuming that's probably going to be announced in General Conference, but that's an assumption on my part. A couple days later, there was new guidance published about using other translations of the Bible and not just exclusively using the King James Version. I'm going to skip that one. That's this one with 1 hour Palm Sunday. I think that's probably just this year rather than every year. And then the most recent big change that I'm aware of was that women can now serve in Sunday school presidencies. Before, it had to be 3 Melchizedek priesthood holders. So now it can still be that, or it can be 3 women. So either has to be 3 women or 3 Melchizedek priesthood holders. Okay, so there's been a lot of changes. They just keep coming. There's probably stuff that's already in the pipeline, things that were planned while President Nelson was still alive. And so I think that we can expect more changes. Now, missionary work. Let me show you what I mean. And this is going to set us up for what we're going to talk about with changing the mission age potentially, or extending missions. All right, for this, we're going to go to my spreadsheet called Timeline Missionary Work. We're going to go back to the year 2002. Church begins to incrementally allow young men from 48 countries to serve missions at the age of 18. So as far as I know, this was the beginning of the lowering of the mission age. I don't know how long it had been the standard that men would go when they're 19. I think for some time. But in 2002, they started to experiment with this. And then it became official in General Conference. I'm not sure which one. Actually, maybe it says right here. The October General Conference of 2012. The mission age was lowered. And what happened was this led to a spike of missionaries serving missions, because now you opened up a whole new age group that, of course, a lot of them immediately wanted to go on their missions. And so that's probably what's going to happen with what just happened with the lowering of the mission age for sister missionaries. Now they can serve at 18. Okay, so I'm viewing these actions as all potentially kind of like an all hands on deck. We need to get more missionaries. We need to get them sooner. Even if, you have this missionary surge that's just temporary. Maybe they want it. I know that there's other reasons. President Oaks recently said that he wanted to give young women options, and it might be better for them if they choose to go on a mission soon and then they get married afterwards. But I still feel like it's all hands on deck. And then in 2018, President Nelson's first year as president of the church, he introduced the Lord's Youth Battalion. And I don't think that was just a motivational fluff type thing. He really meant it. And then 2019, Service Missionary Program expands to all the United States and Canada. All applicants are first considered for full-time proselyting missions. So we have this, like the young service missionaries, that now becomes a thing. And so that allows for more people to serve missions. Because I think probably before that, it was just like, oh, sorry, we can't have you as a proselyting missionary. But now they can still serve missions in the capacity of a service missionary. So more missionaries. 2021, based on area presidency direction and approval, eligible members of the church anywhere in the world may now be considered for a senior service mission, according to a letter from the First Presidency. Previously, senior service mission assignments were only available to those living in the United States, Canada, and a limited number of other areas. So that leads to more missionaries, all hands on deck. 2022, President Nelson made a special request during General Conference for more missionaries, and as a result, we are currently seeing a surge from that, based on quotes that we've read from various general authorities. And then we got more missions coming, 36 new missions created in 2024. November 1st, 2024, Single men 40 years old and over can now serve as senior missionaries. So that leads to more missionaries, all hands on deck. And then we have the lowering of the mission age for women. Now we're in President Oak's presidency. The age changed from 19 to 18, all hands on deck. And that's probably going to lead to another missionary surge on top of the one that's already happening with President Nelson's request for more missionaries. And then the last one that I have on here, the Utah Salt Lake City Temple Square mission was discontinued. So you're going to have sister missionaries where they're going to serve in the missions around Salt Lake City, and some of them will serve like for a few months at Temple Square. So you'll still have sister missionaries at Temple Square, but they're not going to exclusively be at Temple Square. So more missionaries doing proselyting. So you see what I mean? And so if we ask the question, can the church do anything else to increase the number of missionaries or increase the amount of time that missionaries serve? What would have to happen? Let's look at what President Nelson said November 1st, 2018. This is a social media post. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just always blown away by this every time I think about it. He says, "We're just at the exponential phase of growth." And I think that's what all this is about. I think that whether by revelation and or studies, data, projections, or both, the prophet, including the now prophet President Nelson, President Oaks, they probably have reason to believe that it is an all hands on deck situation. We need as many missionaries as possible. We're just at the exponential phase of growth. And then he continues by saying, "And it will continue. The Lord has said, I will hasten my work in its time." And he makes good on his promises. My dear friends, we are witnesses to the process of restoration. If you think the church is fully restored, you're just seeing the beginning. There's much more to come. Wait until next year, and then the next year, eat your vitamins, get your rest. It's going to be exciting. Okay, so let's go to the church handbook and let's see the current requirements and limitations. And let's think about different possibilities. Because I think this may not be as far-fetched as what you might think, as far as extending the length of time that people serve, possibly changing the age brackets. So first we have this section, 24.2.1, young teaching missionaries. Young teaching missionaries are assigned to teach the gospel away from home. These assignments are made by apostles through revelation. These missionaries serve under the direction of a mission president. And then you have men and women. So single men ages 18 through 25 may serve as teaching missionaries. They usually serve for 24 months. Single women ages 18 to 29 may serve as teaching missionaries. They usually serve for 18 months. And so I wonder, could anything change with the mission age? Now, I highly doubt that they would go any younger than 18. I don't see that. But I wonder if we're kind of making male and female missionaries the same as like in terms of like lowering the mission age, I wonder if maybe they would extend the mission age for single men to 29. So for both men and women, you can serve sometime between 18 and 29. One thing about that, I'm not sure that would happen because President Oaks has expressed his concern about people delaying marriage. And he wants young adults to get married sooner because we have this really bad trend where we're kind of following the world and we're delaying marriage and we're putting off having children. So that may prevent that. But what about the amount of time served? What if instead of 24 months, what if we add on another 6 months or another 12 months? Again, that's kind of hard to picture. I could see 6 more months. My understanding is that there have been missionaries that have extended their missions, like a mission president will ask if they want to extend their mission. Maybe you can speak to this, put it in the comments below. Are you someone who had your mission extended or know somebody who did? Because I'm pretty sure I've heard of it happening. And doing 6 more months, maybe that's not too much to ask. I don't know. Or what if they did something where it's like, okay, we need you to serve for 24 months, but everybody is going to have the opportunity to extend. So it's like optional. Do you want to extend for another 6 months, 12 months? Again, I have a hard time picturing more than 2 years, but I don't think it's impossible. And then with women, what if they changed that? I mean, they lowered the mission age to 18. What if they changed it from 18 months to 24 months? Why couldn't that happen? I'm just thinking of possibilities. It just feels like the church is wanting more missionaries, and so much is changing. And I feel like the church is positioning itself in such a way that it can grow quicker and become more and more a global church. And we've talked about the second coming. I'm not going to read the quote right now, but we have 2 quotes from Brad Wilcox where he talked about when Christ comes that there's going to be a large influx of new converts. And he asked the question, are we going to have enough bishops? Are we going to have enough missionaries, enough Relief Society presidents, so on and so forth? And so this exponential growth that President Nelson is talking about, it very well could be that it's just related to before the second coming. But I wonder if he's also thinking about that influx immediately after the second coming. So I don't know. We're going to talk more about this idea of extending the length of a mission. I don't think it's too far-fetched. I think it would be a hard pill to swallow for a lot. So if they were going to do something like that, I would think that maybe it'd be more optional. But then you have this section down here. This is young service missionaries, and it's the same as far as the ages go and the length of service for both men and women. It's the same as teaching missionaries. And then we have senior missionaries. Married members ages 40 and older may be called as senior missionaries as a couple if they do not have dependent children. Single men and women ages 40 and older may also be called as senior missionaries if they do not have minor children living at home. So here's one of the changes that we saw. I guess before this point, it was women aged 40 and older, but now men have been added to this. So if you're a single man, 40 or older, and you don't have minor children living at home, you can now be a service missionary. All senior missionaries are encouraged to find people to teach and help them prepare for baptism. I should have highlighted this. Senior missionaries usually serve away from home 6 to 23 months. For those who serve outside their resident country, those who serve outside their resident country usually serve for at least 18 months. So again, maybe there's potential here, maybe even more potential to ask people to serve longer, possibly. What do you think? I don't know. I'm not betting the farm on this, but I think it's possible. Men and women ages 26 and older may be called as senior service missionaries. So opposed to these other types of senior missionaries, I guess there's like the division like senior missionaries and also senior service missionaries. And then it has a table here, which is really interesting. It shows the different types of missionaries and, who calls them and who they're assigned by, set apart by, who they report to. So that's kind of interesting. As I was trying to research for this video, I wanted to know, for proselyting missions, what's the longest known proselyting mission? Um, who or what was the youngest age at which somebody served a mission, and the oldest age, and things like that. Well, there's a church news article published July 13th, 2017, New Views into Missionary History. And it says, as soon as the church was organized in 1830, its members set out to preach the gospel to family, friends, and neighbors. 100 years later, nearly 38,000 men and women had served proselytizing missions for the church. Now, almost 2 centuries after the first preaching, a new database provides fresh new insights about the earliest missionaries. The Church History Library's Early Mormon Missionaries database, online at history.lds.org/missionary, attempts to document every proselytizing missionary who served during the first century of the church's history. The database currently lists nearly 38,000 individuals with links to thousands of original and authoritative records of missionary experience. The database can be searched by name or by mission to find stories, photos, and sources of early Mormon missionaries. Here are 5 things we learn from this powerful new resource. And for this first section, we're actually going to go to a different article. This is on the church website, and it has the same information and a little bit more. If you go to the very bottom, here are the highlights from this database that they found. Okay, so I know that it is not the first century anymore in church history, and times were different back then. But in case you think things have to stay the same, that it can only be 2 years for elders and only 18 months for sisters or whatever. Just look how it was back then, and look at what has happened recently. We've seen things go away that we never thought would go away, with like the Saturday evening session of General Conference, home teaching, and so many other things. 2-hour church. Things can change in a really dramatic way, it turns out. All right, I'm going to go through this whole bullet point list because these are all interesting. Okay, the first one, the first missionary was Samuel H. Smith in New York, June 1830. That was the Prophet Joseph Smith's brother. And I'm pretty sure he's one of the 8 witnesses buried in Nauvoo, I believe. Anyway, if someone could confirm that really quick, do it in the comments, please. The first mission president was Heber C. Kimball in Britain, 1837. First sister missionaries, Mercy Fielding Thompson and Mary Fielding in Toronto, 1837. First mission president's wife to accompany her husband, Mary Jane Metcalf Bell in Malta, 1853. I cannot believe that there was missionary work being done in Malta in 1853. That seems kind of early, but whatever. First sister missionary without her husband, Mildred Randall in Hawaii, 1865. And then I have this highlighted because these are the first, what we think of now as like young sister missionaries. First single sister missionaries, Amanda Inez Knight and Lucy Jane Brimhall in Britain, 1898. So for all intents and purposes, as far as like missionaries as we think of them today, and single sister missionaries, it seems like this is when it began, 1898. Okay, now, youngest missionary, Don Carlos Smith. That's also one of Joseph Smith's brothers, I believe. At the age of 14. Oh yeah, accompanied his father, Joseph Smith Sr. Yeah, so it's Joseph Smith's brother. To New York and Canada, 1830. And then I know Joseph Fielding Smith, age at time of mission, he went to Hawaii. I was hoping this would come up easier, but he was only like 15 years old when he went to Hawaii. Yeah, right here. At the age of 15. Oh, not Joseph Fielding Smith. Joseph F. Smith served a mission at 15 years old. Times were different back then, I understand. But here we have Don Carlos Smith, 14, Joseph F. Smith at 15. Youngest sister missionary, Lavera Wilcox in Samoa at age 15 in 1911. Youngest mission president, Herbert Brown Folger, was appointed as acting mission president of the Tahitian mission at age 18. I can't imagine that. About a week before his 19th birthday, 1925. I think I am going to skip down. Now, here are the ones I'm really interested in terms of what's possible. Not that we're going to do a repeat of the first century, but okay, longest mission, Willard Washington Bean and his wife Rebecca served for 24 years caring for the Smith family farm in Palmyra from 1915 to 1939. I guess if we were talking in like if it was modern day, I guess they would be considered like senior missionaries or senior service missionaries. But 24 years. And then the next one, the longest proselytizing mission. Wilford Jenkins Cole and his wife Ellen Elizabeth Chase Cole served for 13 years in Hawaii, 1908 to 2022. So it's not the type of mission that we think of today where you have two sisters or two elders and they're all single. This is a couple, but a proselytizing mission for 13 years. Longest serving mission president, Samuel Otis Benyon, served for just over 27 years in the Central States Mission, 1906 to 1934. This is essentially the mission that was headquartered here in Independence, Missouri. And I did a video before talking about the fact that after I was born, my first residence was in an area called Benyon in Utah, and I found out that it's named after this family. So I think it's interesting that now I live in Independence. And then most missions served, Orson Pratt Sr. served 25 missions. And Stella Richards served 5 missions. Okay. So, I don't know. All we can do is just wait and see what happens. But if we just pay attention to these cells right here that are this kind of pinkish color that says all hands on deck, there's been a number of these. And it really kind of picked up starting in 2012. But I feel like there's a trend here. It feels like the church is really doing something with missionary work and wanting more missionaries and potentially more time served. So I guess I just wouldn't be surprised if during President Oak's presidency, there were more announcements that are along these lines, whether it has to do with the age or whether it has to do with options to extend or maybe something that we're not even thinking about right now. Can you think of any other ways that missionary work could change that would allow for more missionaries or missionaries serving for a longer time, or somehow freeing up resources so more time can be spent on teaching missions or maybe even new methods of missionary work? I know that since the time I served as a missionary back from 2004 to 2006, that since that time, there's been emphasis on missionaries using technology and social media. In fact, President Nelson, I think it was when he was still president of the Quorum of the 12, he was pushing for these teaching missionaries to have smartphones and tablets. This was before COVID. And it turned out that was inspired. It was prophetic because when COVID hit, missionary work was able to continue in a way that it wouldn't have been able to without smartphones and tablets. So I wonder if maybe there will be more and more non-traditional methods of spreading the gospel by teaching missionaries. Anyway, that's all that I have for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.